Good afternoon, Ellis County, and all of those in hearing distance of our Facebook Live event today. We are in about week 6 now of our State of the County, City, School District, Healthcare for 2020, which has been an odd year. I am blessed and honored to be sitting in the DA's office, Ellis County and District Attorney, Mr. Patrick Wilson, here with me. Thank you
Hi,
so
Sandy.
much for
Glad to be
joining
here.
us. And if I don't know if you can zoom in on those photos behind me, but it's such an interesting. Patrick Wilson is such an interesting guy to me because you think oftentimes of the District Attorney being this real straight-laced, and not that you're not straight-laced, but this real straight-laced professional, dealing with the hard crimes all the time. But Patrick Wilson is one of the most humane, giving people I have run across in my tenure at the Chamber of Commerce. And a lot of these pictures back here just show some of his great personality and some of the things he does. I think one time I even saw him doing a comedy show.
That's right. That's right. I was in improv comedy for a long time.
Improv comedy, yeah, and I got to see one of your shows. So that always is exciting to me to know that somebody is in such a powerful position that you're in, to have so many layers to yourself as a human. And you're a father of how many kiddos?
Two little boys.
2 little boys. So there's just a lot of layers to this gentleman sitting next to me, and you'll see as we talk all of the things that he deals with on a daily basis. So just to give you some background, Patrick was appointed to his position in 2010 because of a vacancy, and then a couple of years after that he had to go through the formal election process. So in 2012 he was officially elected by the constituents of Ellis County, and then served that 4-year term and was reelected again in 2016, which brings us to today, 2020. He's chosen not to go up for reelection. He's had his
Had enough.
he's had enough. So I'm going to start out with a question that I always think is interesting because he's been in this spot for 10 years. Like I said, it is a very powerful position, but it is also a position of seeing and hearing and having to be involved with a lot of things. You're always dealing with everybody's worst day, I guess. And so tell us what it's like to be a district attorney at the same time as trying to be a father and just, have a normal life. What has the district attorney's office done to you as Patrick Wilson?
That is an interesting question. I'll tell you how that balancing act has played out at my house on more than one occasion. So it's not uncommon to be in the news for what we do here. And many times over my career, I've been interviewed by TV stations and newspapers and things like that. And my kids, to my knowledge, have never seen any of my TV interviews.
Yeah. So how old are they?
Well, they're now 11 and 8, just turned 11 and 8. So, they're about an age now where they could start seeing that. Yeah. But the reason they never saw any of my TV interviews is because I was always being interviewed about rather bad things. Yes. Child molestation, murder, those sorts of topics. Not things I really want to say,
explain.
Hey, kids.
Yeah. By the way, this happens in the world, Johnny.
Right. This is what I did all day today.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. You have to be very diligent about not bringing that home.
Sure.
But I will tell you, it can be stressful for sure, this kind of business. And as long as I've been in it, it's only been in the last couple of years that I finally had the light bulb moment that even you just talked about. Nobody crosses paths with the DA's office because something good is happening in their life. It's the reality of it. They've either committed a crime or been accused of it, or they've been a victim of a crime, or they're a witness to a crime, and as a result, they have been involuntarily brought into the criminal justice system, and they don't want to be part of it. And so, you've got all that to deal with.
So nobody comes and visits Patrick in his office for fun things like me today.
Except you, right? This is quite a break.
Can we announce who our visitor was that didn't get camera time yet, but we'll have to post a picture.
Yes,
so and we'll talk about several of the things that Patrick has been a part of, some huge advancements, some changes, some improvements over his 10 years. But I think one of the things he says he's worked the hardest on for several years is getting I want to call her a service dog, but she's not really a facility dog. So tell us about Ellis County's facility dog. Right. Verity is her name, which means...
she is a golden lab, or yellow lab. Yeah. Verity means truth, so we just got her from Canine Companions International about 30 days ago. They asked us not even to disclose it until she'd been here for about 30 days. You got to meet her before we started recording. It's a process we've been working on for many years, but Grace Panditharai, you know Grace, she's our office handler. She's one of my senior attorneys. We went through the lengthy approval process, and they modified their training during the COVID. She got approved, and so she's right down the hall now, and she's here. She's able to provide comfort to victims of trauma, and as you heard Grace say, even the secondary trauma that people in these offices experience, to just go deal with that. And I'm looking forward to see what she can bring to everybody else.
We'll be sure to post a picture of her on our social media soon, so everybody can see Verity, which means peace,
truth.
Right? It means truth. I'm sorry, I missed that. So Verity means truth, which is exactly what these guys fight for on a daily basis, guys and girls. So you have a staff of about 40, 45 people?
45 about, and 17 of those are assistant lawyers. So there's 18 lawyers in the office right now. We've just got approval for a couple more positions. So in the next budget year, we'll actually have a total of 20 lawyers on staff here, including me.
Now, you're increasing your staff, but we had talked earlier about crime rates, and crime rates have statistically been going down for 40 years. So it's very interesting to hear about.
There's a common belief, we talked about narratives and false narratives, and one of the false narratives that I think many people accept today is that crime in our country continues to go up and up and up. Now, we have to set 2020 aside from this conversation because it's an anomaly in all respects. But actually, crime in our country is at historic lows and has been that way for many, many years. If you go back all the way to the 1960s, it's continued to drop. And so we're at historic lows. Now, the rate of crime is not the same as volume of crime. And so while this community continues to grow, the volume of cases we have will continue to grow. So if you only have one crime for every 10 citizens, if you get 100 more citizens, you have 10 more crimes. So it's that phenomenon is what we're dealing with.
He is full of, and I'll do it in a minute. I'm going to give him some rapid fire of things that just me as a citizen scrolling through Facebook see often, and we'll see how he handles each one of those. So in your tenure in this last 10 years, we've looked back on several locations that you've been a part of, because you started at the courthouse, but then they were going to remodel the courthouse, so they put you over in the old Walmart.
Yes, that was fun.
Which is now Hobby Lobby. So if everybody knows where Hobby Lobby is, that used to be the DA's office.
My specific office actually backed up to Tractor Supply. It was not unusual for their forklift to bang into the wall, and we'd come flying out. And one time, I swear they left one running, and it the fumes leaked into my air vent, and I had to call them because I was getting really sleepy.
You're like, I shouldn't fall asleep. This is a major crime that we're talking about here. But then you guys finally got to land in this building about the same time you started your DA.
Summer of 2010, and so it was the end of 2010 when I got appointed and took office January 1 of 2011. It's a really, really nice building. But after 10 years of the old Walmart and what we call the trailer courts, the double wide trailers that were literally here, you never thought you'd be at a place like this. So it's really nice.
And you're a homegrown boy. You grew up right here, born and raised in Waxahachie, and went to college at A&M, and then Lubbock. You went to Texas Tech for law school. Were your parents born and raised in Waxahachie as well?
My dad was. My dad was born in Waxahachie, so I'm a fifth generation resident of Ellis County. My dad's dad and mom came from the Avalon Ennis area, and then relocated to Waxahachie. So my kids are the fourth generation Waxahachie residents and sixth generation Ellis County residents.
And guys, when the district attorney of your town decides to stay in your town, it must be a pretty good place, right?
I think so. Yeah.
If he's not running from the hills, I'm not running for the hills. So let's talk about 2020. You guys have been just discombobulated for nearly the whole year. I mean, January and February was relatively normal. I think we used the comment as blissfully ignorant we all were back in January and February.
It was a nice time, wasn't it?
And then March, I think it was end of March for you guys. Different dates for everybody that they got shut down, obviously, but March 23rd, I think, was the date that you had to send everybody home.
Yeah, that was, I guess, the day that will live in infamy in this office. I believe it was March 23rd. The governor had his press conference, and I sat here in my office and watched it. And as soon as he was done, I got up and I walked around the office, and I literally said, "Go home, get up, go home." The governor said, "Go home." And at that point, my next step was to designate essential employees. And so out of a staff of 45, we were down to 4. Me, my first assistant, my office manager, my chief investigator. And we never stopped coming to work. We were still up here 40 hours a week, all day, every day, managing suddenly this new world we were in, trying to figure out how to adapt to this new world, putting plans in place, trying to get new technologies implemented.
But if you were like us, it was probably 2 or 3 weeks when we just thought, oh, this is just a break. We don't need to adapt yet, so to speak, because it took us a little while to realize, oh, wait a minute, we're going to be shut down for a while. You know, like I know at the chamber, we didn't cancel events in May or even end of April. We canceled what we had in March and just thought April 1st we'll all be back to doing what we normally do. And so then it was like that month of April when it started settling in, thinking, wait a minute, we better figure out how to make sure we're working remotely. And
oh, you're right.
Yeah.
Well, that was part of it, is how long are we going to be in this place, and how much work do we put into this temporary thing, and then as temporary becomes more permanent, you start to realize you've got to put a lot more work into making this work long term, because especially for the criminal justice system, you just can't do this in a pandemic world. You can't do what you need to do at the volume and the pace you need to do in a pandemic world.
Yeah.
And no amount of remote technology, no amount of social distancing is going to allow it, unless every community suddenly builds a Jerry World-sized football stadium and says, let's all go have our court proceedings here. It just can't happen.
And speaking of a Jerry World type stadium, you guys actually talked to the school district about the potential of doing jury trials in the stadium.
Early on, we had conversations with WISD, and honestly, I was surprised at how receptive they were to us using a gymnasium, the Ellis County court system, using a gymnasium for trials. And we started moving that direction, but there are just so many moving parts with that idea. It's just a phenomenally complicated endeavor to get to pull it off, and it just we didn't get it done.
And the Texas Supreme Court is not allowing you guys to do jury trials anyway.
In general. They've been pushing out a series of edicts about monthly since all this began. They've now pushed out something like 26, so obviously more than one a month. But as of their latest one last week, there are no jury trials allowed in Texas until December 1st. There are some serious caveats with that. If they come in and they approve the process, but the process requires all kinds of social distancing mechanisms, and there are some counties that are beginning to ramp up. I don't see that happening in Ellis County, honestly. I don't think we'll have a jury trial before the end of the year in Ellis County.
So I know there's probably people listening right now that are thinking, well, what happens to the people that are sitting in jail and waiting for their court? They wait.
That's a legitimate question. So there's been some natural attrition in the jail. We are still disposing of cases. We have implemented remote technologies, and so we now have in Ellis County the technology that we can still dispose of a case remotely, completely remotely. The defendant can be in the jail, the judge can be in the courtroom, the prosecutor can be in their bedroom, the defense attorney can be in their kitchen, and we can do all of that, and all the paperwork can even be signed electronically. So we have that ability now. We're still having some hiccups in terms of the willingness of the various participants to adopt and use that technology. So some of those cases are still being disposed. A good number of them are. We're also seeing fewer arrests. We were for several months seeing fewer arrests. Just as a natural, I think, reaction of law enforcement to exercise a little bit more discretion. That's beginning to trend back up. But to your ultimate question, there are people in jail that have either been unable to post bond, or the reality of it is that maybe they have other holds. They're waiting for business in other counties. They're waiting to go to prison. It's going to be a long time until they can get to trial. And there is a push across the state to try to reduce bonds, but then that opens up the question of, well, who do you provide lower bonds to? You know, the guy that murdered somebody, do you want a low bond for that person? Maybe not.
Exactly. So you led to it a little bit. You said about the number of arrests are going down, but they've plummeted. The number of cases has gone way down. You looked up some numbers for me a few minutes ago. 2,700. We're on track to have about 2,700 this year, when usually it's in excess of 4,000.
Right. That's where it's been in the last few years. It's been up in the neighborhood of 4,000, and so that COVID is a big part of that. I've even asked my staff just what are their thoughts on that. So we all agree COVID's a big part of that. You asked the question, does it mean fewer crimes are being committed? I don't know the answer to that. there was a big change in the marijuana laws at the last legislative session that really impacted that, and that I think has reduced some of the numbers.
Yeah.
But we're not really going to have a clear idea of what was responsible for that for another couple of years down the road until we look back and get all the data together.
Yeah.
But it's noticeable for sure.
Yeah, it's already noticeable. It's probably too early to really say what the solid trend is, because the year's not even done, and we can't compare it then to next year.
And numbers are beginning to trend up just in the last few weeks, honestly. Now that we talked about, there's school's back in session, and there's just feeling of new normal.
Yes, yeah, that people are coming back to normal. So you mentioned a couple of different things that I want to make sure that everybody knows what all you handle here, because it's kind of like Law and Order, where you guys prosecute, the police officer catches and builds the case, turns it over to you, and you guys prosecute, or maybe not. You might not choose to prosecute, but there are so many different areas that you work in. Not only that criminal prosecution, but CPS.
We represent CPS. We handle the juvenile prosecutions, which is a hybrid between criminal and civil. We will seek protective orders for victims of domestic violence. We will seek involuntary commitments, mental health commitments for people who have a loved one who's having a mental crisis. We also represent we are the in-house legal counsel for Ellis County government, which is a big complex operation, and so we have lawyers in the office that don't do any criminal work. There are roughly 24 independently elected county elected officials.
So the commissioners, the sheriff, the county judge, the other judges, and things
collectively
like that.
or individually. A benign example, let's say there's one of the random county departments that says, we've got a problem employee, we've got an HR matter on our hand, what do we do? Well, the HR director will partner with our office to kind of navigate that department through that legal challenge, just like any law firm might do with their client.
Which it's, you always see you guys, like you said earlier, on the news about these wild cases. We don't even realize all the other stuff that you're
the mundane
all the other paper pushing and the mundane things, and not the
it's
flashy
not all law
crimes.
and order. It's not all. It's rarely law and order. Sure.
Really. So I like I said earlier, there's a lot of things that just the common folk like I do, like I see on social media. And you see people complain a lot. You see a lot of narratives. And I think we officially live in a day and age controlled by social media and what people see. And so there may be, I think there's an average, you said earlier, an average of 10 million cases across the U.S. a year.
Arrests. 10 or more million arrests a year.
So not all of those may or may not be prosecuted, but 10 million people a year are getting arrested. Unfortunately, we see tragic things happen, whether it's police officers getting shot, or people in the streets that are getting shot, and people see the video and think it's an unfair situation. All of those things, when you look at the numbers of arrests that are happening on average, we've got a pretty good justice system, I would think. I mean, it looks to me like the numbers are still pretty good. Even though there's tragedy, it's human. There's a human factor to all of that. So when somebody looks at you and says, the justice system is broken, does that just rile you up? Because it kind of riles me up, and I don't even do the work you do.
It does. It riles me up for a lot of reasons, because to back it up, we live in a world where our reality is controlled by narratives. Narratives don't control our narratives control our reality, not the reality controlling our narratives, is what I meant to say. And when people say the criminal justice system is broken, they are therefore saying it doesn't work for anybody.
Right.
And that's a false narrative. And I reject the idea that it doesn't work for anybody. I think it works for lots of people. I think it works for lots of victims. I think it works for lots of people who are accused. I think it works for a lot of people who have underlying needs, rehabilitative needs. And, as I told you this story, and I'll tell it now, and, everybody has an anecdote to support their worldview about everything these days, right?
Yes, absolutely.
This happened to me, therefore it must be true globally.
Yes.
So I'm going to share one of my own. Last year, I went home. My plumber was in my house working on something. I walked in, and he had a guy with him. And I introduced myself. I didn't know him, but he knew me by name. First words he said to me were, "You saved my life." and having had that experience before, I had an idea what he was about to say, and I was pretty close. He went on to say, "You prosecuted me." He said "you," even though it wasn't me literally. I don't think it was literally me, but he said,
Your team.
"You prosecuted me. I had some drugs. I went to prison." But he said at prison, he got into a men's Bible study group. He got off drugs. It was through that men's Bible study group that he met the man who became his employer and the plumber, and he did a great job. He'd become a productive member of society. And so I hold that up as an example of the current system can work for people. That it will never work for everybody.
Right.
No system will ever work for everybody.
As no diet will ever work for anybody.
Right.
Everybody has no exercise program will work for everybody. It is in general a good system.
I think it is.
And when you told me that story, I was expecting you to say, when the gentleman said you saved my life, I was expecting that he was a victim, that you saved him from his aggressor or whatever. But no, he was the person that you actually put in jail.
Right.
That then found the right way.
He found the right path.
Going along those lines, though, I have heard you talk also about the winds of change that are happening in criminal justice, where it's starting to become such a socially active or social justice thing, or reform justice, where people are saying you shouldn't put them in jail, you should put them, get them reform or get them whatever. And it sounds like a great idea.
Right, it does. right, and that's both the beauty and the danger of those kinds of movements, right? Because it sounds great in theory. The danger is, if you dare to oppose that, then you get vilified as being irrational and not, you're not with the
not trying to help them out of the
right, which is one of the false narratives. But we see this in all public institutions, in particular the public school system and the criminal justice system. More and more and more of society's ills are being dumped upon us to deal with them. And I can only speak to my own profession and my own experience. I am not a social worker. I was not trained as a social worker. I don't know. I've never met a single lawyer in my career who was trained as a social worker.
Right.
I've never met a single judge in my career who was trained as a social worker.
Right.
Now, in recent years, you're beginning to meet police officers who get trained in mental health crisis, and that's admirable and that's laudable. But it's a system that is not designed to fix the problems that are being thrust upon it, and that's a problem. And so when people say, "Well, look, that did not serve that person's needs," they need to step back and realize it's a system that wasn't designed to serve those needs.
Right. Your wheelhouse is prosecuting criminals,
right.
and for you guys to then try to jump into the another wheelhouse of being a social services place or a reform place or something like that, just dilutes what you're able to do.
It's just very challenging, the expectations that are placed on us. It is the legal goal. I'm at a loss for words. My job description, legal job description of a prosecutor in the state of Texas, is not to convict, but to see that justice is done.
Yes.
Now, the problem with that is it's to see that justice is done. It doesn't say it's to see that justice continues to be done ad infinitum in the life of this individual who crossed paths with you at some point in time.
Yes.
We take these facts, we take these circumstances, we try to make the just outcome, but we're now being forced to put a crystal ball over our eyes and envision what the consequences of all of this is going to be for everybody years down the road, and to try to ameliorate any negative effects of that. It's just an overwhelming expectation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think jails are doing a good job of providing things like that for those who want reform to become a part of a men's Bible study or whatever the things. Whatever the things that the jails have different opportunities, whether it's finding church if that's what you want, or drug rehab if that's what you seek when you're in jail. But I know from personal experience, until somebody wants to be reformed, they're not going to be reformed.
Right.
So to say that you're going to stand up there and say, Judge, I've studied his entire life and the whole course that got him here, and I believe that this is where he needs to go and just be reformed, forget jail. That's impossible.
It is impossible.
We already have a backlog.
And people know this in their own life experiences.
Yes.
Let's say you've struggled with weight.
Yeah.
You've had a weight problem. You can go buy all the books you want. You could have a fitness coach. You can do whatever. But until that switch gets flipped inside you internally, you're never going to make the personal change you need to make in any aspect of your life.
Absolutely.
And no amount of external pressure can force it.
Yeah, absolutely. You made mention of the gentleman, the plumber's assistant, and he was put in jail for a drug charge. And that reminded me of another narrative that you hear a lot. You hear a lot of people saying, oh, they're spending all of our tax dollars and our time to put away these minor crimes of this guy had a one marijuana joint in his cup holder and he's in jail ruining his life, as though the jails are just overrun with minor drug offenses.
It's
Is that the truth?
No, that's not true. It's just false. It's one of the many false narratives of the criminal justice system. Prisons in particular are not overflowing with drug offenders. In fact, incarceration rates in Texas prisons are at about 20-year lows now, and so that means they're not as full as they were 20 years ago, which means there are fewer people there. And they've now reached a point where those who advocate decarceration, that is, removing more people from prison, they are now faced with letting violent offenders out. That is sooner than expected. And the reality of it is, I don't think the average citizen, at least not the average Ellis County citizen, wants the person who has been sentenced for 20 years for aggravated robbery or manslaughter or crimes against children or whatever the case may be. I don't think they want their sentences reduced. And that's just the reality of it. But there are those with very extreme agendas who will never be satisfied with the number of people in prisons. And the only way they're going to get to those numbers is by pulling those people out of the population there.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe we can attribute some of it to, like you mentioned earlier, loosened laws in regards to marijuana and things like that are happening now, or an increased number of police, or I don't know. I know police are a lot more highly trained now than they ever have been before. So I think there's a lot of things that play into it for sure. So talking about police. You have and work alongside the police department, but there's a lot of accusations sometimes when there's a case that people aren't happy about how it happened. People will say, "Oh, they're all in bed together." The DA and the police officers, they all just hang out on Friday nights together and decide all these horrible things that they can do to the population when they arrest them. And even though you guys do work on the same type of things, you don't have any authority over the police in any way.
And that's a great misperception in this business. No prosecutor, at least in the state of Texas, no prosecutor has any legal authority over any police agency. None whatsoever. We may like them to do things a certain way, but all we can do is ask. We can try to cajole. We might try to arm twist a little bit, but when the rubber hits the road, we have no legal authority. And this idea that we're in each other's hip pockets, I think police and prosecutors laugh at that because there's a saying in my business that I've jokingly said for years that police in every jurisdiction think the prosecutors in every other jurisdiction are better than their own. Prosecutors in every jurisdiction think the police in every other jurisdiction are better than their own. Because we all go to trainings, and the prosecutors go to trainings where prosecutors from other counties tell these stories about, look what the cops in our county did this case, and we all go, it doesn't happen here. And the police go to trainings where they say, look at the prosecutors in our county did, and then they come back, oh, y'all are worthless, And so this idea that we are locked arm in arm, we are allies in the same fight. I think we are allied in the same fight to make our communities safe places to live and work and play and raise our families. But we do have different objectives. The police, generally speaking, are obligated to protect and serve. As I said, our job is to see that justice is done. Those things can be achieved independently in the same case, although it appears they're not aligned. And so perhaps somebody gets arrested righteously, the officer witnesses the DWI, does everything, but maybe the video evidence of him performing the field sobriety tests inadvertently gets deleted through no fault of anybody, technology. We no longer have that evidence. Keeping with our obligation to see that justice is done, we have to dismiss the case. It's not a reflection on the officer. It's just the reality.
It's just the way it is. how often, or has it happened very many times in your tenure where you wanted to prosecute but you just couldn't? It seems like on a personal level to have to see somebody that,
that's the context where that has happened to me the times I can think of it the most is not wanting to prosecute somebody but was unable to. It was wanting to help a victim but was unable to.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different question.
Sure.
What I mean by that, the example that came to my mind is going to the Children's Advocacy Center, where the way that works, a child says, I've been abused. The police take them there. There's a trained third-party interviewer. The multidisciplinary team watches the interview from another room on them, and so the child only has to tell the story once. Yeah. And the most frustrating situation is when everybody, and we've seen lots of these cases, everybody believes something happened to that child.
Yeah.
It just, you can't come away from that not thinking something happened to that child. But the child was maybe not old enough to properly articulate, or for any number of reasons. You also realize we can't even make an arrest in this case. Yeah. Those are the most heartbreaking circumstances.
Yeah. And would you say that those end up coming back to you down the road in another case, or do you see that repeat offense?
Well, with those types of offenders, you just hope nobody gets hurt in the process before you have the opportunity to catch them. But to your question about, somebody charged with the crime, unable to prosecute them, that doesn't happen like you may think. And I think that comes back to, the lawyers, we're charged with objectively analyzing things. And the criminal justice system is set up so that you don't hire me to prosecute the case. You just happen to be the unfortunate victim of a crime that violated the laws of the state of Texas. Yeah. And so we have to take emotion out of the equation and just evaluate it. And the decisions we have to make, you as the victim in my hypothetical, you may not like it. Odds are you won't like it in that circumstance. But if we allowed you to make those decisions on emotion, injustice would be rampant all over the world. And so I can't recall any right off the top of my head where I said, I want to get that guy, but we couldn't do it.
Yeah. One of the things that I enjoy so much about Patrick, and I've served with him in several different capacities. Patrick serves a lot on the community, within the community with different nonprofits, and as though he doesn't have enough on his plate, he does serve in many different capacities across the county and the city of Waxahachie. And it's amazing to have him in meetings with you, because he is always that one that's always very objective and is able to bring everybody back to the facts of what's going on and where we need to. Don't waste time here. That's emotion. Let's get back to where the facts are.
Get the ball moving.
He's always the one pulling us back to truth, and I love that. I have seen you stand very tall at times when you were being attacked, or your office may have been attacked. And not even knowing the details of the case, I was always impressed with how tall you stood and how you never felt the need to be apologetic in your course of action that you took, or that your team took. And to see that confidence come from you and from your team just shows that you guys know what you're doing over here.
Well,
and it doesn't always mean just going after as many people as you can
really
put behind the bars.
It's not at all.
Yeah. So what came about with your decision to not run again?
It really was a slow burn process that built up over probably 2 years. It really was. And when I issued a statement, my announcement almost 2 years ago that I wasn't going to run again, I kind of touched on some of those true stories, but this is one that it kind of sums it all up. I keep hearing noises. It's the doors next door. Sorry.
He's got a lot of traffic. There's a lot of activity going on outside there.
But I was at a gym, and this kind of sums up the overall experience. It was a local Gold's gym. Honestly, I was working out at lunchtime, had my earbuds in, working up a sweat, and there was somebody I recognized from across the room. In my business, if you think you recognize somebody, you don't necessarily go up and say, "Hey."
Right. Didn't we put you in jail a few years ago?
So it was a woman. She finally approached me, and she said, I was sitting on a bench, I vividly remember, and she said, "Are you Patrick Wilson?" And I said, "Yes." And she told me her name, and I instantly knew who she was. Yeah. And she was the widow of a man who had been murdered, and we prosecuted her husband's killer. And it was a big case. and we exchanged pleasantries. And when she walked away, and I even get choked up now just kind of thinking about it, I literally just kind of had to rest with my head on my knees for a minute. And that's when that revelation hit me of, I'm tired of knowing people only because of the very worst thing that's ever happened to them. You know, and I've crossed paths with a lot of good people that have had really bad things happen to them. You know, and I could tell some more of those kinds of stories.
Sure you're full of them.
But at some point, your cup just gets full. You know, and I gotta hand that off to somebody else.
But you have your assistant district attorney Ann Montgomery was elected for the position,
and
so
I'm very
well
proud of her.
equipped,
Yeah, I think so. And you know, she got a very solid win in the primary, which I'm proud of her for that. I think that's a reflection that the community supports what we've been doing here for the last 10 years, and they'd like to see going forward. There were a lot of, I think, unfair statements made during that campaign, but I believe the numbers speak for themselves. Those false narratives were rejected, and this community likes the way we're running the show around here.
Absolutely. I know that Ann is very, very respected, and will pick up the baton right where you left off. So tell us what the future for Patrick Wilson looks like.
I honestly don't know. I'm looking at some different opportunities. The normal career path for somebody like me would be to go into criminal defense work or to just traditional law practice. Those are not those don't hold any appeal to me.
I was going to say, do you want to be a criminal defense attorney?
No, I don't. I say that and people think I have a negative view of them. I don't. They serve a vital function in society. That has no appeal to me. And so I've got some irons in the fire, and I'm looking at some different opportunities in the Metroplex. Probably more than likely is what it's looking like right now.
Well, we look forward to it, and I know it's a heavy burden to carry that you've been a part of everybody's worst day, but I can assure you those bad days that you were a part of led to beautiful days thereafter, when they were saved from whatever their situation was, or at least had a chance to recover from it and find justice for what happened.
It is rewarding.
There's a lot of people that would agree with me when I say Patrick Wilson has changed many lives, and not just the lives of the victims that he's found justice for, but people that he has worked alongside in so many different roles with child abuse and child advocacy, and the United Way, the Chamber of Commerce. He has found a way to be an asset in this community that reaches far beyond what the district attorney's office is able to reach. So we sure do appreciate your service, and we look forward to what all you're going to do in Waxahachie. As long as you don't leave Waxahachie, you can do whatever you want, whatever you want. And you guys, be sure to leave comments and let Patrick know what a great job he's done. He's spent his last year of the district attorney in COVID, so what a weird way to go out.
It has been really weird for all of us.
But luckily, he's done so many amazing things long before.
It promoted some casual attire, so I'm all for that.
That's fantastic. So they've got great things going. He's going out with a bang with that beautiful puppy. What is it,
Verity?
Verity. I've got to get that right. Verity, going out with Verity coming in. So what a great thing for the victims of crimes that are going to have to come in here and do what they do. So again, thank you for everybody watching. Be sure to tune in next week. We've got a couple more weeks on our plate. We're going to be visiting with the chief of police, the fire chief, and all kinds of good things still coming up. So we'll see you next Thursday, same time, 4 p.m. Thanks so much for watching.